So I couldn't think of a sadder picture for advertising than Don Draper from Mad Men with a stain on his shirt and a drunk mode. But advertising obviously is going through a lot of changes right now, bit of a painful dynamic. I'm going to talk about today what I'm seeing and how I'm seeing the role of analytics and AI. I've got blood on my hands as a result of 2 tech companies I've started in this world as well. But I am a recovering agency executive. I've been in that world for a long time, and then before launching Market Share, which thankfully became the largest analytics and attribution company for marketers globally. Sold that to Neustar, sold Neustar, and then joined Upfront Ventures last year as a board partner there to help drive dynamics with investments in excuse me, in U.S. Upfront's one of the largest VC firms in the States. It's an exciting industry, as those of you who are involved. By the way, just by a quick show of hands, how many people are involved in the marketing industry, per se? And the technology space, just pure tech? And just here because you by the way, if you're at home and watching this on live streaming, you don't need to raise your hand. That would be weird. But this is an industry that has been completely targeted and disrupted by technology. Think about it 20 years ago when there were a handful of television channels or radio stations or newspapers where money was being allocated. All of a sudden, the growth and the money focused from the Googles and the Facebooks of the world have completely upended that. And it's working. People are spending more and more time consuming content and engaging on digital platforms. R&D budgets, if you just look at the dollars being invested from an R&D standpoint, just dwarfs most of the traditional industries. And that's changing quickly. And obviously it's working. We're seeing more and more what's called share shift, money being shifted from traditional media to digital. And as a result, it makes it easier to automate. As more money goes from manual to a digital platform, so does the world of automation and programmatic that follows. Big numbers. I mean, just last year, we've seen 60% just controlled by Google and Facebook. FT in December said it was 84% globally, excluding China. Enormous change happening in that world. I've been excited about the application of analytics for over 20 years now. How do you use data to make better decisions? That's really a passion area of mine. And I look at analytics and AI and machine learning as interconnected activities. And as the last panelist mentioned, they're not substitutable. They complement each other. They're related. Most companies are still trying to figure out the basics. And most companies are still at this path of looking backward, using analytics to do reporting or to do monitoring or analyzing it. I'm excited about the next phase of that, which has really been happening for the past 5 years. How do you use analytics to look forward? How do you use AI to drive automated, forward-looking decisions? That changes the game. It takes the risk out. It allows you to be more agile. It changes the whole ecosystem. And that's really, you'll see in a moment, some things that I'm excited about on the technology front. I think as it relates to decision making, I see AI really as almost augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial, because I see it helping executives make better decisions about how to allocate money. Where should the next dollar or pound or euro go? If there's a weather event happening in 2 days, let's move the money if people can't get out of their house to go eat at McDonald's or go to Zara. So how do you do that on an automated, course-corrected manner? That's happening today. How do you get the attribution right? In my background, how do you actually understand if you spend this and this and this and this, and it gets very muddy, how do you know what's actually driving business performance? Not just short-term, but also long-term oriented. What's building brand? What's actually driving, if someone walks into a store and then uses their mobile device to make a purchase, understanding the interactions between those activities is really important. Otherwise, your decision-making will be wrong. I think looking at AI as a way to build connections is interesting. I'm seeing businesses around the world right now using facial recognition. If you look at what Facebook is doing, it's 96% match rate now. It's 1% right now better than humans can do in terms of facial recognition. So the technology is changing our ability and also businesses' abilities to understand who their customers are, what motivates them. If they sound tired in a fast food line, you can actually make suggested offers real time based on what's being picked up. It's happening at McDonald's in a test right now. Or in banking, where I've spent a lot of time, using the analytics to figure out who next likely purchase or what the most likely offer should be, using AI to do that rather than humans or CRM software, actually leads to business performance lift. That's the goal. That's the goal of all this. How do we make better decisions that lead to more profitable revenue? Products that we're working with, I'm seeing around the world, Stitch Fit or Nanit, one of our investments, or Ring, the doorbell company that was one of Upfront's big investments. The ability to use that technology and data and computer vision to make better decisions on the fly is a game changer. It adds more value to the consumers, and it's also a more profitable way of operating. And an orchestration is the last piece of this, which I'm excited about. A friend of mine, Mark Pritchard, is a global CMO of Procter & Gamble. And he's come out very strong about the idea of starting with, every plan starts with, how do you deploy data? How do you gather data? How do you deploy analytics? What's the measurement strategy going to be? How do you start to build internal teams? That's something they've done a lot of. As it's not been good news from an agency perspective. They've cut their budgets significantly. I think $400 million in the past year. 25% of their total budgets have been cut for external use in exchange for building this internally. Because as I said earlier, as more money has shifted from offline to digital, it's making it easier to do planning and allocation and implementation by internal teams and ultimately by AI and ultimately by automated programmatic. How do you also disrupt mass marketing? Many brand managers now at some packaged goods companies I know will get fired if they come forward with a plan that has more than 50% of their budget in traditional media. So they're being pushed from all over. And I'm seeing this. I'm on, this year, been on 3 public company boards. And the pressure from the board to the organizations is astonishing to figure out how to adopt technology, how to leverage AI better, how to make better, smarter, data-driven decisions. It's happening globally, and it's an exciting time. Oops, sorry about the slide messed up there. One of the ventures that my company Market Share created was a joint venture with Ticketmaster, because there was an enormous opportunity to fix dynamic pricing. To fix ticketing and event pricing through dynamic pricing. 40% of all live entertainment goes unsold. Concerts, music, sports, things like that. It's a huge number. And that the hot stuff sells out really quickly, or to the secondary market. So if you can use AI and analytics to make better decisions and do that automatically, that changes the game for the artist or the sports team. And that's what we've done with, my old company had done with Ticketmaster. 6 billion tickets now have been priced through this tool that on the fly course corrects based on everything from what's happening in that town that weekend, to weather, to competition, to search activity, to buzz, to music downloads, what have you. Whether the team's doing well, all those things are interacting with the analytic models. As it gets more tactical, we're finding that analytics and AI can actually help drive things like, how do you predict buyers? You may have you may be more likely to respond to a certain type of marketing than this gentleman, and so understanding and using the data to gather that up so you can take some of that risk out is very important. Or how do you find more of the good ones? How do you cut out spending to maybe less targeted or less profitable customers, and how do you use AI and analytics to get to the better ones? That's something that we're seeing AI happening right now. Or looking at understanding what are people likely to do. What if you present a certain thing to a certain individual, and that's why identity is becoming more and more important. That's why the use of data, that's why I thought Market Share and Neustar would be a very logical combination. If you can marry analytics and attribution with identity, that's the next generation of targeting and attribution. And of course, you can use AI to actually understand and predict app usage, bid landscape estimation, like how much should I pay, or so companies like MediaMath are doing this 3-4 billion times a day, optimizing this in the AI platforms. And of course, predicting market pricing, what days or what moments or what ad units are going to be likely the best time to put a particular ad into. So that really changes the way advertising works. So if you can automate that, can't automate the creative per se. I'm seeing 1 or 2 companies right now doing that. But the process of doing planning and allocation, attribution, and execution all within one technology stack, and then doing it with agility, doing it where it's updating and refreshing on a regular basis, like real time, is a real game changer. It's happening, it's here. Speaking of Darwin, I've just come off of two weeks in the jungle in Rwanda and Tanzania in the Serengeti there, and sitting there in the communing with silverback gorillas in Rwanda, you actually see the impact of evolution, right? Everywhere, everything's optimized, and if it's not, it's dead. And there's a constant need for optimization, improvement, and natural selection. And I'm really seeing that in business happening right now. I'm seeing that happening with marketing organizations that either get this or don't, or CMOs that get this or don't. And I think it's a very interesting, a pivotal time for the marketing industry. One of the biggest challenges is creating an ROI culture for company, creating a culture of accountability, of reward, not creating fear, not creating negative reinforcement for risk taking. Because it's more risky, I think, right now to do nothing than to try new things. There's that much change underfoot right now. I think that, but most companies are still having a trouble with actually answering these questions. This is, my friend Terry Kowalzer has a company called Luma Partners that puts out this Lumascape every year. These are actual technology companies involved in the marketing and advertising space right now. It's a nightmare. If you're a CMO, a friend of mine who's the CMO of MasterCard told me he gets 350 calls or emails a day from companies trying to get in the door there. And you just can't do it. You can't handle that. So how do you cut through this noise and figure out what do you actually need? So I've got a roadmap at the end of this that will give a sense of where I think companies should be investing from a technology standpoint. The eBay CFO, Bob Swan, told me this once. I thought it summed it up great. I add up the ROIs of each of my business silos. The company is twice as big as it actually is. And that's not what you want to hear from your CFO or your board. You want to have your finances believed. You want to have your projections, your numbers believed. You don't want to weaponize the data. I think we're entering this era of transparency where analytic results have to be trusted. The business performance has to be a common metric. It can't be 10 different metrics that are being used, again, to weaponize. Otherwise, it loses all credibility. I think that one thing that's also kind of scary for me is the companies that don't have supportive CEOs or boards that really literally don't get what we're talking about. A company I was with recently in Japan, the CEO said, "We have all this data, go do something." That's what he told his executive team. He's still the guy who gets his emails printed out by his secretary so he can write responses so she can then go type them back and send them off. So that person wouldn't last very well in Rwanda. The need for evolution is happening. So, but my point is, if from a marketer, just from a career standpoint, I mean, if you're in a company that you feel like the leadership doesn't get it or doesn't believe it, and you feel like you're fighting all the time, this is my advice. Just get out. Just get the hell out of there. There are a lot of exciting companies looking for smart people. And by the way, LA is hiring like crazy if anyone wants to move to Los Angeles. So greatest number of engineers produced by any city in the world. It's really exciting times in Los Angeles right now. So I think that as it relates to the use of AI and improving and evolving, I really see this migration happening from using very backward-looking, simple tools or metrics, like you may have heard of media mix models or things like digital attribution or metrics like ROI, return on investment. That's yesteryear. That literally is 20 years old. I think that moving much more into the space of return on marginal investment, my next dollar or euro invested here is going to yield this much in business performance. Having that ability to prove definitively that if I do this, this is what will happen, changes the game for marketers. Ann Lunas is an old client of mine, the CMO of Adobe, can now walk into her CEO and say, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what will happen. I need this much money to do it, and it happens. And that level of assuredness that we just heard from Manoj is exactly what I'm finding to be so important with business right now. Looking at lifetime value, looking at the total value of a customer, and understanding how these things interact to drive the best business performance. Having predictive and prescriptive analytics is critical. Part of getting to this point is having the right technology stack. Back to that Lumascape, it's a mess right now. So I think that what I'm finding, though, is many CMOs are really being given the responsibility for building out this technology platform. It's not really falling necessarily in the land of the CIO. They've got much bigger fish to fry. So we're finding that CMOs are all of a sudden becoming chief marketing technologists as well. And the need to build out infrastructure, platforms, middleware, instead of just focusing on the upper left quadrant, which is where they've been operating for many years, focusing on the marketing experience. And it's not just media, by the way. It's the customer experience, it's touch points, it's the packaging experience. All those things interact. But there are a lot of other pieces that go into the equation now. I think that Denise Karkos summed it up very well. She's the CMO of TD Ameritrade, which is Toronto Dominion, and one of the best CMOs I've ever worked with. But she can now go into her board, which is comprised of hedge fund executives and serious finance people, and actually go toe-to-toe with that board and that leadership, and say, this is what I've delivered to the business. Here's the actual P&L contribution I'm adding. Here's what $1 invested in marketing is yielding in terms of, net new customers, which is an important metric, or net new assets that are coming in the door. So looking at those variables, looking at how to create much more predictability, much more forward-looking view into the business has completely changed the game for Denise and others. So there really is that interesting subset of CMOs I'm excited about, because it's working. When you actually deploy the right AI into these businesses, we're seeing big lifts. We're seeing 3 to 15% business performance in sectors. You can't compete with that if you're not deploying. It's impossible to compete effectively. So I think in terms of the plan for next week or tomorrow, if you wish, I'd like to understand, if I were you, what are the areas that can be most improved and helped by the use of AI and this sort of technology in the organization? Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's R&D, maybe it's product innovation, maybe it's customer service. Where can this sort of technology actually be most successfully levered? And how do you baby step? How do you create successes? How do you create some easy wins that you can merchandise and then politically use that as a way to move up the stack? How do you get the executives and the board and the other team leaders excited about this? That's a big piece of this as well. It's hard to just be your own person fighting this. And then how do we actually understand what data do you have? Where are the pockets of data opportunity? There's only one company in 20 years that I've been involved in that didn't have the data to do what we're talking about. Everyone, early days at market share, no one thought they had the data. They all had the data. It was all just pocketed away in different places. The data exists to do this sort of work and to train the models. It obviously, by definition, unstructured, which is where AI can be very useful. What infrastructure and team do you need? It may need to be outsourced at first. Ultimately, like P&G is doing, you need to really own this. You can't relegate decision-making anymore when you need this kind of agility and speed. And then lastly, decision engines are the technology stack that I think is very exciting. I'm writing another Harvard Business Review article, and this is going to be centered around this idea of decision engines. But every company has basically 7 technology platforms that they need. There's perfunctory ones like data and automation and workflow and reporting. But as it relates to how you allocate your money, campaign level optimization or execution programmatic, those are really essential to get right and to not think, I've not found one company that can do all of them well. They all like to, all the tech marketing clouds do, but they don't have all the components yet. So it is finding the best combinations. I'm also finding companies are excited about partnering with either doing M&A to buy, build, or partner, or to partner with the VC community. We're doing hackathons often with some of these companies. Walter Delf and Jeff Schumacher are friends who run BCG Ventures. Amazing business, and what they do is they partner with large companies to help bring innovation and drive breakthrough ideas that just can't be done in organizations because of fear of failure. So there's lots of different things that can be done about bringing this, but it's an exciting time. I think that it is a different world than we've ever been in. It is the beginning, I think, of the new world that we're all gathered here to celebrate. And I'm excited about how you can marry capital, ideas, and technology together. Thank you very much.